All right, so the topic today is on your graduate research plan statement, part of the NSF application. And before we begin, I wanted to see where people are at in terms of what they're thinking about writing their research statement on. So in the chat box, if you want to just chime in with what level you are, level 0 being no idea, level 1 you maybe have a general idea but you're not really sure what specific experiments you want to do. Level 2, you got multiple competing ideas, or level 3, you pretty much know exactly what you're writing on. All right, so, oh good. Got a couple 3s and a few 1s, 2 to 3. Okay, cool. That's great. So the advice, well, basically a lot of the advice I'm giving today is like to help you decide what you should write on. And even if you have a pretty good idea of what you think you're going to write on, it might be worth considering what the best experiments to write on will be. So basically, as you probably know, the graduate research plan it's written in the style of a grant proposal, but you don't actually have to carry out the proposed research. It's a thought experiment that demonstrates to the reviewers that you can think scientifically and design experiments well. And because you don't actually have to do the research, you can be pretty creative and ambitious in choosing what you decide to write about. Okay, so you want to write about your research, but you want to choose projects that are really well thought out and also are really creative, novel, and ambitious. So think about that. How will your graduate research statement be evaluated? So according to the solicitation, unsurprisingly, they're going to evaluate you on intellectual merit. So your proposals, potential to advance knowledge in its own field or across different fields, and the potential for the proposal to benefit society. So your broader impacts there. They're going to look at whether your proposed activities suggest and explore creative, original, or potentially transformative concepts. They're going to check to see that your plan for carrying out the research is well-reasoned, well-organized, and based on a sound rationale. And I think this one's probably the most important here. And also, does it incorporate a mechanism to assess success? How well qualified is the individual to carry it out? And that will be based on it'll be related to your personal statement, basically. And then, are there adequate resources available to the PI to carry out the proposed research activities? So this is all what NSF says that they're going to evaluate your proposal on. Really what I think it comes down to is that it's really well written and well thought out and shows clear scientific thinking. So that's going to be the most important part, I think, of the proposal. So what you should write about is basically your research. So your PI probably researches a bunch of different things. Your PI's research basically will give you the context for your experiments and will also provide the resources you need to carry out your research. But your proposed research should be unique. It should be building upon previous findings from your PI's research, but taking it outside of the bubble, moving it in a new direction. So you should be exploring potentially novel methods or novel questions that haven't been answered before. And you should really try to incorporate your skills that you've acquired from your previous research experiences into the research that you propose. And you can also incorporate novel collaborations as part of that too. So this is your chance to take the types of things your PI is researching and bring in your own skills and knowledge and propose new questions. So if you're still in this level 1 stage and you need inspiration and help deciding what to write on, you can do literature searches and do some reading on what people are publishing. And while you do that, make sure you take a lot of notes and save citations. And I recommend that everybody uses a reference manager, such as Mendeley. This will make adding the citations to your GRFP a lot easier. So I would download something like Mendeley or Zotero to manage your papers for citations. If you need more inspiration, you can ask to read your PI's grant proposals. And this can be a really good source of inspiration, but you just want to be careful not to be too inspired by them because you are supposed to be coming up with your own independent experiments. And definitely schedule a meeting with your PI to discuss ideas. And I would give that advice to everybody. And then due this week, is research proposal pitches. So this is basically going to be a rough sketch of your ideas for your experiments, and I'm going to email out a template for you to use for this. And I think it's a good thing to have too many ideas at this point, because you can really pick which ones are going to be the best ones to write about. And I can give you my thoughts on that, and it's also something you can discuss with your PI. Okay, so according to my PI, there are 4 questions of research proposals, and I think that these questions are a really good way these 4 questions are really great when you're trying to draft your research proposal or any grant proposal and make a case to the reviewers for why they should fund you. And the 4 questions, are: number 1, is it important? Number 2, is it novel? Number 3, is it feasible? And number 4, why you? So is it important? So for the NSF, this is going to be whether or not it's important to fundamental processes in science. So basically, is what you're studying, does it have implications for fundamental processes? Will it help, put together a piece of the puzzle that was missing before? And that's basically the intellectual merit of your proposal. And you can also, everyone thinks their own research is important, but you want to really think about what the potential implications can be for your research in the broader picture, in the wider picture. And then obviously for NSF, if it benefits society, that's a broader impact. That's also really important. So both of these, intellectual merit, broader impacts, address the question of is it important? And you want to really think about that. Okay, is it novel? So I recommend using this known unknown model when you're writing about your proposed research. So basically you set up your question by talking about what is known, and then describing the gap in knowledge, and then describing how your study will fill the gap in knowledge. And just the fact that what you're studying is unknown is not enough. It's also got to be important, as I discussed in the previous slide. And you want to engage the reader into finding out what is unknown. And I'm calling this the burning question. So you want to set it up so that you give the reader enough background knowledge to know what you're studying, and then point out the giant hole and make them want to fund you to fill the gap in the knowledge. And I put a picture of a cicada here because I was just watching a David Attenborough nature documentary, and he mentioned that they didn't know how the cicadas are able to count. They come out every 17 years, and how they're able to count to 17 is still an unknown question in biology. And I thought that was really interesting. But you could consider is that an important question, or is it just kind of a curiosity? And I was thinking that you could actually make a strong case that it is important, because it has to do with circadian rhythms, molecular biological clocks, and you could probably actually write a really cool proposal on that. So yeah, that's my example. And also, if you use any novel or improved methods, you would want to write about that, of course. And are your experiments creative or potentially transformative? If so, you want to write that. All right. Is it feasible? So in order to convince your reviewers that your proposed research is feasible, you'll want to describe your methods in enough detail that basically the reviewers feel confident that you know what you are doing. And you can also support your methods by citing successful experiments that use the same methods. And I suggest using ACS format to save space on citations. And if you're using new methods, how will you validate them to prove that they work? And the best experiments are ones where you gain knowledge regardless of the results. So if you get one result, it means this, and if you get the other result, then it means something else. You gain knowledge regardless of what the outcome is. And that would be, it's an experiment that's most likely to be successful. And it's also a really good idea to have a contingency plan. So consider what happens if your experiments don't work. What would you do then? So reviewers really like this. I've seen that mentioned in a number of reviewer feedback. Last question, why you? So you really want to address in your research proposal or potentially in your personal statement. Why you, your PI, your institution, your collaborators, your study system is the best for answering your big questions. And your research experience will speak to this. Your personal statement will set this up. And if you're lacking in a skill needed to do your project, you should explain how you're going to acquire that skill. Okay, so this is my suggestion for how to partition your graduate research plan. It's 2 pages, which is really short and pretty difficult to fit in everything you're going to want to say. I recommend putting your title on there. I think technically you can input it as a separate line in Fastlane, or I mean in the research.gov website if you want to like save one line, but I think it's nice to have the title on there. Your introduction will take up maybe like 1 paragraph, and this is going to provide the context, why your research is important and why it's novel. And the context in the introduction will set up your big question or your hypotheses, and then my suggestion is to use the 3 aim method. So the NSF-GRFP is a 3-year grant. So each aim is like 1 year of that grant. And you can also think of each aim as a paper, as an independent paper. And within each aim, you're gonna write the hypothesis of the aim, the methods, and the anticipated results. At the end, somewhere in here, you need to have a section on intellectual merit. I suggest putting it at the end, and that'll be a little summary on how you're going to advance knowledge. You could also consider just combining this with the introduction, because why important and why novel are basically intellectual merit. But I think it's nice to, when you're making a really strong case for why your research should be funded, it's nice to put a concluding paragraph at the end summarizing like, this is how my research will advance knowledge. And then finally, you need about a paragraph of broader impact, so how your research will benefit society. And then at the bottom, you'll put your citations. And like I mentioned before, I recommend using ACS format because it's the smallest format possible. The NSF will accept any journal citation format, and this is the American Chemical Society. It just happens to be the smallest one. So since you're going to need every ounce of space, I recommend using that one. So your background and introduction, I would say a maximum of 2 short paragraphs here, about half a page. And you want to give the importance and background of your study system and set up what is already known about it in as few words as possible and what is unknown. And then you'll state what your big question is and why it's interesting. So you want to set up your burning question here. And I have a couple examples of setting up the burning question using this model. I've just taken the quote from like what is unknown, but these are some examples. Like, 1 roadblock to accessing global nitrogen fixation rates is the incomplete understanding of asymbiotic nitrogen fixation. Like, don't you just want to figure out what's happening there? Little is known about the role of active transport in plant-biotic interactions. To date, only 1 publication has looked at mRNA involvement in Th17 differentiation. While neural circuits underpin all behaviors and we're beginning to understand how single cells process information, it's still unclear how even 2 neurons work in a simple circuit. So I think these are all examples where they make a strong case for why their research is necessary, and you should kind of follow this model when you're setting up your questions. So for your hypothesis or your research questions, you want to think about, for all your experiments, what is the big overarching question you're trying to answer? And you can choose to phrase this as a hypothesis or as a question. So I have 2 examples here that are actually, the study subjects are similar. And this one, she set up a hypothesis about, let's see, so I hypothesize that these effectors are secreted in the phloem, contribute significantly to the pathogenicity of class, and can travel through intercellular spaces via the phloem via sieve elements and plasmodemata. So she has, basically, her question is like, how are they secreted? What do they do? But she's hypothesizing what she thinks they do. And this is in the 2014 Plant Path essay if you want to read the whole proposal. And then I have another example here, which was from mine, where my big question was, how do downy mildew effectors manipulate plant immunity and metabolism to promote pathogenesis and biotrophy? And then my aims are going to answer this question. And personally, I like the question method more than the hypothesis, unless your research is really lends itself to having a very clear hypothesis, because you don't know what you're going to find out. And so I like having a question and then some like a hypothesis and an alternate hypothesis to follow up in each aim. Preliminary data, definitely included if you have it. It does take up space, but I think it makes a really compelling case for your research. And if you do have a figure that is small enough, then I would use it. Basically, my rule of thumb is use a figure only if it's worth 1,000 words. So this one here it's a really nice figure. Here, I think the main thing that this figure does is just demonstrates that this person has intellectual merit and communication skills. Like they're able to make a really nice figure that could go in like a Nature paper. And it also does, if you read the paragraph, which we won't go into, it does make a strong case for their research as well. And if you don't have preliminary data, don't worry about it. Okay. 3 years, 3 aims, 3 papers. For your different aims, they shouldn't be interdependent. So having complementary aims is better, because if one aim fails, then you don't have, like, what are you gonna do for the rest of the 3 years of your research project? And you can also do 2 to 4 aims depending on your project. 4 is really hard to write about in 2 pages, but I have seen a lot of proposals that just do 2 major aims. And then for each aim, you're gonna have your hypothesis or question, methods, state your anticipated results, like if you see X, then it means Y, and do have a contingency plan either for the whole project or for each aim if it's appropriate. And just trust me that reviewers really like that you've thought about what happens if your experiment doesn't work. And not for technical reasons, but just for biological or scientific reasons. Okay. Intellectual merit section. So the intellectual merit of your proposal is pretty much implicit throughout your entire research proposal, but so I would recommend using this section as a summary and a conclusion. And I already talked about this, but you could put it in the introduction, but I think it makes a stronger case at the end. And basically you just want to emphasize how your research will advance knowledge, what fields will be affected by this, and what's the bigger context. And I would say like 2 to 3 sentences probably max. Broader impact section must be included. I would do a whole paragraph here, and you're going to want to talk about the societal benefits of your research. So the US economy, the environment, climate change, etc., public policy. You can also talk about here how you're going to share your results. Are you going to blog about your research, etc.? How you communicate your results to the public. If you're planning on training undergrads, you want to mention that here, or training other like high school interns, and also talk about any outreach you're planning to do. And then if you really want to impress the reviewers, you should propose a novel broader impact activity that goes along with your research, and probably describe this in detail in your personal statement, because there won't be room in the research statement. Just a note on formatting, it's standard 8.5 by 11 page size, Times New Roman, no smaller than 11 point, so I'm assuming everyone will use 11 point. 1-inch margins, and no less than single spacing. And they're pretty serious about this, so some people, actually my PI even was like, oh, you can change the spacing to be like 10 points or whatever and save a couple lines, but they actually check this. They have a computer thing that like runs all the essays through and checks to make sure that they meet formatting requirements, and they'll reject you on the spot if you don't meet their formatting requirements. So don't try to cheat to save space. It's not worth it. And the page limits do include all the references, citations, figures, etc. So you have only 2 pages for the research proposal. Okay, and then that brings me to the assignment this week. Basically, I want you to pitch your research proposal to me, and for each pitch, describe what the big question is, why it's important, how you're going to answer the question, how is it novel, is it feasible, and why are you the best person to study it. And you can do multiple ones if you can, and I'll send out a template for doing that. And that'll be due next Wednesday. And that is my entire presentation. Does anyone have any questions?
I had a question.
Yeah.
You had mentioned including a novel broader impact. What would be a good example of a novel broader? Is that like starting your own like outreach program or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to basically talk about it more in the broader impacts one, which will be the next webinar.
Okay.
But the idea is like coming up with anything. It could be like a module for a science museum or something. It's related to your research, or yeah, like an activity that could be done in a K through 12 classroom, or there's a number of different things that it could be, but like basically if it's something that helps communicate your research to a wider audience, or yeah, or basically that.
Cool.
Any other questions?
Do we have to touch on like how we're going to secure funding sources if our PI doesn't have equipment available?
Well, you know, they're probably not going to know that, so I don't know. It's like you do want to mention what resources you do have access to in your proposal.
And
so, yeah.
By that, does it have to be just within the lab that you're going to be part of, or could that be like external resources as well?
Yeah, and I mean, NSF actually really wants to promote collaboration, especially interdisciplinary collaboration. So if you're planning on, you know, collaborating to access some equipment or whatnot, definitely write about that in here. Yep, that would be a good thing to do. But yeah, I would definitely list all the resources you have at your disposal.
Okay, and the pitches, those are going to be written or delivered?
Yeah, written.
Okay.
So I'll just send a little template and you guys can send me that. And then the next week I'll have you do a full outline for the research proposal. And then I'll also have your personal statements, my comments turned back into you by next Wednesday too. So you can take a look at that. So yeah, you guys feel ready to write your research plan?
More ready than I was like 20 minutes ago.
Perfect, that's all I wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I was reading the solicitation again as I do, and like it really doesn't give you any guidance for how to write this thing. So yeah, this is my advice based on years of reading these and reading hundreds of these. This is what I suggest to do. It's a foolproof way.
Thanks, Kelsey.
Yeah, thank you guys for showing up. And I really look forward to reading your pitches.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did you dye your hair again?
Yeah, I just dyed it pink.
So cute. I popped up and I was like, I want to chat it, but that's not appropriate.
No worries. Yeah, I like it.
Thank you. See you next week.
Yeah, see you next. All right, well, we're going to take a week off.
Oh, sorry. I wrote it in my planner. See you in 2 weeks.
Yeah, you guys enjoy a week off. Get all your stuff taken care of, and reconvene in 2 weeks.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.